Real men don't care about Christmas. We just tolerate it. What matters most to us is seeing the people that we're responsible for safe, warm, and smiling. That's the masculine instinct. Not joy, it's duty. That's why a man gets socks every year and still flashes a smile. The point is simple. We want everyone else covered. If you remove women from the equation, Christmas would die instantly. The story is sacred, but the date was assigned. We go along with it though for the sake of tradition. We endure so other people can feel that magic. That smile on a man's face isn't happiness, it's the bill being paid. That's not cheer, that's responsibility.
We are living in a moment that people will look back on and say this is where everything quietly changed. Not with a bang, not with a dramatic announcement, but with prices creeping higher, options narrowing, and pressure building on everyday people who did everything they were told would lead to stability. This is not a future problem or a distant concern. This is happening now. And if you stay until the very end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why so many people feel like society itself is reaching a breaking point. And before we get into it, make sure you like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell, and select all if you want more great Angry Guy content, and you want every single video the moment we release it. That support makes a real difference, and it helps keep this channel visible in a world that increasingly discourages honest conversation. Also, make sure you check out Angry's Crypto Academy, which is linked in the description of this video. If you want to learn how to protect and safeguard your assets and grow your wealth, Angry's Crypto Academy teaches you how to buy, sell, and trade crypto responsibly and strategically. It is designed for people who understand that the rules are changing and want to be prepared instead of reactive. So go check it out now. And if you are enjoying these Angry Guy videos and want to show support, you can buy me a Red Bull using the link in the description. It helps fuel the long hours that go into research, writing, and creating these videos, and it is genuinely appreciated. Now let us talk about where we are, how we got here, and why so many people feel like they are being squeezed from every direction at once. There is a growing sense that something is fundamentally off, and it is not because people suddenly forgot how to budget or became irresponsible overnight. It is because the basic math of living no longer works the way it used to. Prices are rising faster than wages. Necessities consume more of each paycheck, and what used to be considered a normal life now feels just out of reach for millions of people who are doing everything they can to stay afloat. As we move toward 2026, the pressure is not easing, it is intensifying. Housing costs remain elevated, food prices continue to climb, energy costs fluctuate but never seem to meaningfully fall, and the idea of building long-term security feels increasingly fragile. For many people, it is no longer about getting ahead. It is about not falling behind. At the same time, we are watching the rapid rollout of systems that promise efficiency and security, but often come with trade-offs that are not openly discussed. Digital identification frameworks, centralized financial infrastructure, and expanded data collection are being framed as inevitable progress. The messaging is always the same. This is for your convenience. This is for safety. This is to modernize outdated systems. But very few people are asked whether they actually want these changes or whether they trust the people implementing them. What makes this moment even more frustrating is the generational divide that sits underneath it all. Those currently holding the most power in political, financial, and institutional systems overwhelmingly come from a generation that entered adulthood during one of the most favorable economic periods in modern history. They benefited from affordable housing, expanding job markets, a strong purchasing power, and systems that rewarded participation rather than punishing it. This generation often presents itself as uniquely disciplined and self-made, as if success was purely the result of character rather than circumstance. The story they tell is simple. They worked hard. They made sacrifices. Anyone struggling today must be doing something wrong. This narrative is repeated endlessly, even as the conditions that enabled that success no longer exist for the generations that followed. What rarely gets acknowledged is that this same generation presided over decades of policy decisions that shifted risk downward and rewards upward. They normalized endless borrowing against the future, expanded debt at every level, and built systems that depended on perpetual growth without accounting for long term sustainability. The bill for those decisions did not disappear. It was simply deferred, and now it is coming due. Younger generations did not inherit an expanding economy with open doors. They inherited an economy loaded with obligations, inflated assets, and shrinking margins for error. They entered adulthood already behind, already paying into systems that offered less in return, already navigating a world where stability requires far more effort and yields far less security. And yet, instead of acknowledging this reality, the dominant response from those in power has been denial and deflection. The struggles of younger people are framed as personal failures rather than structural outcomes. Rising costs are blamed on consumer behavior. Economic stress is dismissed as exaggeration. Calls for reform are labeled as entitlement. There is a reason this feels like gaslighting to so many people. When lived experience directly contradicts official messaging, trust erodes. When people are told the economy is strong while they are skipping meals or delaying medical care, resentment grows. When the same voices that benefited most from the old system insist that nothing is wrong, frustration turns into disengagement. Many people are now asking a hard question. Will those who shaped the system ever acknowledge the consequences of their actions? Will there be an honest reckoning with the way the future was repeatedly leveraged to maintain comfort in the present? Or will this generation cling to its narrative until the very end, refusing to admit fault even as conditions deteriorate for everyone else? Based on what we are seeing, the more likely outcome is doubling down. Admitting error would mean confronting uncomfortable truths about responsibility, fairness, and legacy. It would mean recognizing that prosperity was not solely earned, but also inherited and amplified by timing. For many, that is a step too far. So, what does that mean for everyone else? I mean, it means that waiting for validation or apology is a waste of energy. It means that hoping the system will suddenly become fair is a dangerous gamble. It means that those born after this era must accept a difficult reality. No one is coming to fix this for you. The people who benefited most from the existing structure are deeply invested in preserving it for as long as possible. This is not about resentment or blame for its own sake. It is about clarity. It is about understanding that you cannot build a future by trying to appeal to a generation that has no incentive to change. You cannot sacrifice your well being in the hope that someone else will eventually acknowledge your struggle. The only viable path forward is strategic withdrawal from bad systems and intentional focus on what you can control. That means protecting what you have left instead of feeding it into structures that extract value without offering security in return. It means prioritizing your own stability, your family, and your community rather than chasing approval from institutions that do not serve you. This does not require isolation or bitterness. It requires realism. It requires recognizing lost causes and redirecting energy toward achievable goals. It requires learning new tools, adapting to changing conditions, and building resilience outside traditional pathways that no longer function as promised. This is why so many people are exploring alternative financial systems, decentralized tools, and parallel economies. Not because they are reckless or chasing shortcuts, but because the mainstream options have repeatedly failed to deliver. When trust in institutions collapses, people naturally look for ways to reduce dependence on them. It is also why conversations around personal sovereignty, financial literacy, and digital ownership are gaining traction. These are not fringe interests anymore. They are survival strategies in a world where centralized decision making has proven indifferent to individual outcomes. At the same time, there is a psychological shift happening. Many people are emotionally detaching from narratives that no longer make sense. The promise that everything will work out if you just keep your head down feels hollow when evidence suggests otherwise. This detachment is not apathy, it is self preservation. The idea that everyone must endlessly give, comply, and contribute while receiving diminishing returns is losing its grip. People are starting to ask what they actually owe to systems that have not upheld their side of the social contract. They are questioning whether loyalty to a broken structure is a virtue or a liability. It is important to be clear about something here. This is not a call for chaos or confrontation. It is a call for boundaries. It is about choosing where to invest your time, energy, and resources with intention instead of habit. It is about stepping back. Tough times are here. The 9 to 5 is history, and the creator economy is taking over. Join Angry's Creator Academy to learn how to build a thriving online business from scratch with minimal investment. Ditch the daily grind and flourish while others falter. Plus, sign up now and get our online business blueprint free. The Academy is linked in the description below. Go check it out now. From narratives designed to shame you into participation while ignoring your lived reality. Those currently in power are not unaware of what is happening. They see the strain, they see the numbers, they see the discontent. The problem is not ignorance, the problem is indifference. When consequences are delayed or externalized, accountability fades. That is why expecting a sudden change of heart is unrealistic. Systems rarely reform themselves from the top when those at the top are insulated from the fallout. Meaningful change usually comes from below, not through confrontation, but through withdrawal and replacement. This is where the idea of men walking away resonates so strongly. It is not about anger or hostility. It is about opting out of arrangements that no longer make sense. It is about reclaiming agency in a world that increasingly treats individuals as inputs rather than participants. Walking away does not mean disengaging from life. It means disengaging from narratives that drain you. It means building a life that makes sense on your terms instead of constantly trying to meet expectations designed for a different era under different conditions. This shift can feel uncomfortable, especially for those raised to believe that compliance equals virtue. But there is nothing virtuous about sacrificing your future for the comfort of people who refuse to acknowledge reality. There is nothing noble about staying loyal to systems that are structurally misaligned with your well being. The path forward requires honesty, adaptability, and courage. It requires learning new skills, questioning assumptions, and being willing to stand apart from outdated norms. It requires community with others who see the same patterns and are committed to mutual support rather than competition for scraps. As pressure continues to build, heading into 2026 and beyond, the gap between official narratives and lived experience will widen. Those who prepare now will be better positioned to navigate what comes next. Those who cling to the past will find themselves increasingly out of step with reality. This is not about predicting collapse or fear mongering. It is about recognizing stress fractures and responding intelligently. Societies do not usually fail all at once, they strain, bend, and reconfigure over time. Individuals who adapt early suffer less than those who resist change until it is forced upon them. That is why conversations like this matter. They provide context, validation, and direction in a time when many people feel isolated and confused. They remind you that you are not imagining things and that your instincts to protect yourself are not selfish. They are rational. To really understand why so many people feel the way they do right now, you have to step back and look at how fast the ground has shifted beneath their feet. A generation ago, stability was built through fairly predictable steps. You found work, you paid your bills, You saved a little, and over time you built something resembling security. That path was not perfect, but it was visible and it was achievable for a large portion of the population. Today, that path is fractured. The milestones that once defined adulthood have become moving targets. Home ownership feels distant or impossible for many. Long term employment is increasingly unstable. Retirement is no longer a promise, but a question mark. Even basic planning feels risky when rules and costs change faster than people can adapt. What makes this especially exhausting is the constant insistence that everything is normal. Official messaging continues to emphasize resilience and optimism while quietly shifting responsibility onto individuals. If you are struggling, the implication is that you failed to adapt quickly enough. If you feel overwhelmed, the assumption is that you lack discipline or perspective. But people know better because they live it every day. They see that the system demands more while giving less. They feel the tension between effort and outcome growing wider. And over time, that disconnect erodes motivation. When hard work no longer correlates with progress, people stop believing in the story they are being sold. This is where the psychological toll begins to matter just as much as the financial one. Chronic uncertainty changes how people think and behave. It narrows horizons. It shifts focus from growth to survival. When you are constantly calculating whether you can absorb the next increase, the next bill, the next disruption, there is little room left for optimism. That stress compounds when people are told their experience is invalid. Being dismissed by those who benefited from a different era adds insult to injury. It creates a sense that the game is rigged and that complaints are not only ignored, but ridiculed. This is why the idea of simply working harder rings hollow. Many people are already doing everything they can. They are juggling multiple responsibilities, learning new skills, and making sacrifices that previous generations never had to consider. The problem is not effort. The problem is leverage. Leverage has shifted upward over decades. Power has concentrated in institutions that operate at a scale individuals cannot meaningfully influence. Decisions made far away ripple down into daily life with little accountability. When those decisions fail, the cost is absorbed at the bottom. Debt is one of the clearest examples of this dynamic. Borrowing against the future became normalized as a way to maintain comfort in the present. Governments borrowed, corporations borrowed, consumers were encouraged to borrow. The assumption was that growth would continue indefinitely and that future productivity would cover the bill. But growth slowed, costs rose, and obligations remained. Instead of reckoning with this imbalance, the response has been to double down. More borrowing, more complexity, more mechanisms to extract value from those least able to resist. The result is a population carrying burdens it did not create and did not consent to. Younger generations are paying for decisions made long before they had a voice. They are told this is simply how things work, as if inevitability excuses injustice. And this is where detachment becomes not only understandable but necessary. You cannot solve structural problems through personal guilt or self sacrifice. You cannot fix a system designed to externalize its failures onto you by being more compliant. Detachment does not mean ignorance, it means clarity. It means seeing systems for what they are rather than what they claim to be. It means recognizing when participation is optional and when it is harmful. Like for many, this realization begins quietly. It starts with small decisions, delaying a purchase, questioning a narrative, exploring alternatives. Over time, those decisions add up to a different way of relating to the world. People begin to prioritize flexibility over status. They value skills over credentials. They invest in relationships rather than institutions. They seek optionality rather than promises. This shift often confuses those who are still invested in the old framework. Choosing a different path can be misinterpreted as laziness or rebellion. In reality, it is adaptation. It is a rational response to changing conditions. Adaptation has always been the key to survival. Societies evolve when individuals do. The problem arises when systems resist change, even as reality demands it. That resistance creates friction, and friction creates pressure. We are living in a period of intense pressure. The cracks are visible everywhere: economic strain, cultural division, loss of trust. Each on its own would be challenging. Together, they create an environment where stress becomes the baseline. In such an environment, it is easy to become cynical or withdrawn. That is understandable, but it is not the same as giving up. There is a difference between disengaging from harmful systems and disengaging from life itself. Walking away is about choosing where you stand, not about disappearing. It is about redefining success in a way that aligns with reality rather than nostalgia. It is about acknowledging that the map you are given no longer matches the terrain. This requires mental discipline. It requires unlearning assumptions that no longer hold. It requires letting go of expectations that were built for a world that no longer exists. One of the hardest expectations to release is the idea that fairness will be restored from the top down. History suggests otherwise. Meaningful change rarely comes from those who benefit most from the status quo. It comes from those who quietly build alternatives until the old systems lose relevance. That process is already underway. You can see it in the rise of independent work, alternative education, decentralized communities, and parallel financial systems. You can see it in people choosing simplicity over excess and autonomy over approval. None of this is without risk. Stepping outside established pathways always carries uncertainty, but the illusion of safety within broken systems is far more dangerous. Stability that depends on denial is fragile by definition. This is why personal responsibility matters now more than ever, but not in the way it is often framed. Responsibility is not about absorbing blame for structural failures. It is about making informed choices within imperfect constraints. It is about understanding trade offs and choosing the least damaging options. It is about building buffers where possible and reducing exposure where necessary. It is about refusing to internalize narratives that frame systemic problems as personal shortcomings. At a practical level, this means taking inventory. What are you dependent on? What assumptions underlie that dependence? What happens if those assumptions fail? These are uncomfortable questions, but avoiding them does not make them go away. It also means investing in adaptability, skills that transfer across contexts, knowledge that empowers decision making, networks that provide support beyond transactional relationships. Community becomes increasingly important in times like these. Not the superficial kind built on appearances, but the kind rooted in shared values and mutual respect. When systems strain, people rely on people. This is another area where generational messaging often misses the mark. Individualism was celebrated in times of abundance. In times of scarcity, cooperation matters more. Walking away from harmful structures does not mean walking alone. There is strength in alignment, there is resilience in shared understanding. When people see the same patterns and respond thoughtfully, they reduce isolation and amplify capability. At the same time, it is crucial to avoid turning awareness into obsession. Constantly focusing on what is broken can drain energy and cloud judgment. Awareness should inform action, not replace it. The goal is not to live in a state of permanent vigilance. The goal is to build a life that feels coherent despite external instability. That means creating routines, setting boundaries, and finding meaning outside metrics imposed by systems that no longer serve you. Meaning is often overlooked in discussions about economics and policy, but it matters deeply. When people feel their efforts contribute to something real, they endure hardship more easily. When effort feels wasted, frustration accelerates. This is why so many people are reevaluating what they work for. Money matters, but it is not the only measure of value. Time, autonomy, and peace of mind are increasingly scarce resources. Choosing to protect those resources is not selfish, it is sane. It is an acknowledgement that life is finite and that spending it propping up unsustainable systems is a poor investment. As we move further into this period of transition, the divide between those who adapt and those who cling to the past will widen. Not because one group is better, but because conditions reward flexibility. Those who insist that nothing has changed will struggle the most. Those who accept change without surrendering agency will find ways forward, even if those ways look different from what they were promised. It is important to note that this is not about rejecting everything that came before. There are lessons worth keeping, there are values worth preserving. Hard work, integrity, and responsibility still matter. They just need to be applied within a realistic framework. Blind loyalty to systems that exploit those values is not honorable. Using those values to build something better is. This is the mindset shift at the heart of men walking away. It is not bitterness, it is discernment. It is choosing where to stand and where to step back. When you walk away from narratives that no longer fit, you create space to write your own. That narrative does not need to be grand or revolutionary. It needs to be honest and sustainable. Sustainability is the key word. Sustainable effort, sustainable expectations, sustainable commitments. Anything that requires you to sacrifice your future for short term validation is unsustainable by definition. The coming years will test this principle. Pressure will continue, messaging will intensify. There will be more calls for compliance framed as necessity, more appeals to guilt framed as responsibility. Knowing when to say no will be just as important as knowing when to act. Boundaries will matter. Discernment will matter. Self respect will matter. None of this makes you disengaged from society. It makes you engaged on your own terms. It makes you a participant rather than a pawn. One of the most important things to understand about moments like this is that they rarely announce themselves clearly. There is no single day where everyone wakes up and agrees that the old way no longer works. Instead, people feel it privately long before it becomes obvious publicly. They feel it when effort stops translating into progress. They feel it when the rules seem to change without explanation. They feel it when promises quietly expire. At first, many tried to adapt within the existing framework. They cut expenses. They work longer hours. They chase credentials. They relocate. They take on more risk. These responses are logical because the system has taught them that persistence solves problems. But when persistence yields diminishing returns, something deeper begins to shift. That shift often starts as confusion. People wonder what they are missing. They assume others must have figured something out that they have not. Social comparison intensifies the feeling, especially in a world where curated success is constantly displayed. This can create a sense of personal inadequacy that is completely disconnected from reality. Over time, confusion gives way to frustration. Frustration arises when patterns repeat. When effort consistently fails to produce stability, the mind looks for explanations. Some turn that frustration inward. Others turn it outward. Neither response is particularly helpful on its own. What eventually helps is perspective. Perspective comes from zooming out and recognizing that the problem is not individual failure, but systemic mismatch. The system rewards behaviors that no longer align with widespread well being. It prioritizes scale, speed, and extraction over durability and balance. And once you see that mismatch clearly, it becomes easier to let go of misplaced guilt. You stop asking why you cannot win at a game that is designed to concentrate wins elsewhere. You start asking better questions, like whether playing that game at all makes sense. This is a difficult realization because it challenges deeply ingrained beliefs about merit and reward. Many people were raised to believe that society is fundamentally fair if you follow the rules. Letting go of that belief can feel like losing a moral anchor. But fairness and functionality are not the same thing. A system can function efficiently while producing deeply unfair outcomes. Acknowledging that reality does not make you cynical, it makes you honest. Honesty is the foundation of any meaningful adaptation. Without it, you end up expending energy on illusions. With it, you can begin to align your actions with reality rather than expectation. Alignment is where things start to improve, even under pressure. When your choices reflect actual conditions instead of outdated assumptions, you reduce friction. You stop fighting currents that cannot be reversed by individual effort alone. This does not mean surrender. It means strategic adjustment. It means choosing battles wisely and investing where returns are possible. One of the biggest mistakes people make during periods of transition is clinging to symbols of success that no longer reflect security. Titles, appearances, and conventional milestones can mask vulnerability. Chasing them at all costs can lead to burnout without resilience. Security today is quieter. It looks like adaptability. It looks like optionality. It looks like having multiple ways to respond when conditions change. This is why many people are rethinking traditional definitions of career success. Instead of aiming for a single long term role, they prioritize transferable skills. Instead of loyalty to organizations that offer little in return, they cultivate autonomy. Autonomy does not mean isolation, it means choice. It means having enough control over your time and resources to respond intelligently to change. The same principle applies to finances. Relying entirely on systems you do not control increases vulnerability. Diversifying how you earn, save, and store value reduces it. This is not about chasing trends or speculation. It is about understanding risk concentration. When too much of your life depends on one set of assumptions, you are exposed to shocks you cannot manage. Reducing that exposure is an act of responsibility, not rebellion. It reflects an understanding that resilience comes from redundancy and flexibility, not blind trust. Another area where this shift is visible is identity. Many people tied their sense of worth to roles that are becoming unstable or undervalued. When those roles erode, identity erodes with them. Rebuilding identity around values rather than positions creates stability. Values endure even when circumstances change. Positions do not. This is why so many people feel disoriented right now. The identities they were encouraged to build no longer align with reality. That disorientation can be frightening, but it is also an opportunity. Periods of identity reevaluation often precede growth. They force you to ask who you are outside of expectations imposed by others. They invite you to define success on your own terms. That process takes time. It involves experimentation and reflection. It involves letting go of external validation that no longer fits. Walking away from old identities can feel like loss, even when those identities were burdensome. It is normal to grieve what you thought your life would look like. That grief does not mean you failed, it means you cared. What matters is not clinging to that grief indefinitely. What matters is allowing it to inform wiser choices going forward. The concept of men walking away speaks directly to this process. It is not about rejecting responsibility, it is about rejecting exploitation disguised as duty. Many men were raised to believe their value lay in endless provision, even when the system providing context for that role eroded. They were told to give more, sacrifice more, endure more, while receiving less stability and respect in return. Walking away from that dynamic is not abandonment, it is recalibration. It is choosing to invest effort where it produces mutual benefit rather than one sided depletion. This recalibration often begins internally. It starts with boundaries, saying no to unreasonable demands, questioning expectations that feel misaligned, prioritizing health and clarity over appearances. Externally, it can look like restructuring life around sustainability, choosing work that offers flexibility even if it lacks prestige, choosing environments that respect autonomy over those that promise advancement without security. These choices are often misunderstood by those still operating under old assumptions. That misunderstanding can create friction in relationships and communities. Navigating it requires patience and confidence. Confidence here does not mean arrogance. It means trusting your assessment of reality. It means standing by decisions that protect your long term well being, even when they are unpopular. The coming years will reward this kind of grounded confidence. They will punish denial. Systems under strain tend to offload pressure onto individuals who are least prepared to resist it. Preparation does not guarantee comfort, it increases survivability. It preserves agency. It allows you to respond rather than react. Reaction is what systems rely on. When people are reactive, they are predictable. Predictability makes extraction easier. Response requires space. Space comes from preparation. Preparation comes from honesty. This is why slowing down mentally is so important right now. Constant stimulation and outrage make it harder to see patterns clearly. Clarity requires distance, and distance does not mean disengagement from information. It means choosing what you consume carefully. It means prioritizing understanding over emotional spikes. Those who control narratives often benefit from confusion. Confusion fragments attention and weakens collective insight. Clear thinking counters that. Clear thinking also helps prevent despair. Despair arises when people feel powerless and isolated. Understanding reveals leverage points, even small ones. No individual can fix systemic problems alone, but individuals can position themselves to endure and adapt. They can connect with others who share similar perspectives. They can build pockets of resilience. History shows that resilience often emerges at the margins before it becomes visible at the center. Those who adapt early are often criticized until their choices prove necessary. There is nothing glamorous about early adaptation. It often looks like restraint, humility, and quiet preparation. It lacks the drama of collapsed narratives and the comfort of denial. But it works. As pressures increase, the gap between perception and reality will continue to challenge people. Those who can hold both awareness and composure will navigate this period more effectively than those driven by fear or nostalgia. This does not mean suppressing emotion, it means channeling it constructively. Anger can clarify priorities, concern can motivate preparation, anxiety can highlight vulnerabilities. What matters is not letting emotion replace judgment. Judgment grounded in reality is your most valuable asset right now. It guides decisions when external guidance becomes unreliable. It helps you discern signal from noise. Noise will increase. There will be more promises of easy fixes, more distractions, more attempts to frame systemic strain as personal failure. Resisting those narratives requires discipline. It requires reminding yourself regularly of what you know to be true based on experience and evidence. That is another reason why community matters. Shared reality checks prevent isolation. They reinforce clarity when messaging becomes overwhelming. Walking away does not mean abandoning society, it means disengaging from illusions that weaken you. It means choosing participation that aligns with your values and capacity. There's another layer to this moment that often goes unspoken, and it is the slow erosion of trust. Trust in institutions, trust in messaging, trust in the idea that those steering the ship have a clear plan and a shared interest in the well being of everyone on board. When trust erodes, people do not immediately revolt. They withdraw. They become cautious. They hedge. Hedging is not always visible. It looks like skepticism instead of outrage. It looks like hesitation instead of enthusiasm. It looks like people quietly keeping their options open while publicly going along with the script. This quiet shift is far more consequential than to open resistance because it drains systems of genuine participation. Systems can survive criticism. They struggle to survive indifference. Indifference grows when promises are repeatedly broken without acknowledgement, when accountability is absent, when transparency is replaced with slogans. People notice when rules apply unevenly. They notice when sacrifice is demanded from some and exempted for others. Over time, these observations accumulate into a baseline expectation that official explanations are incomplete at best. Once that expectation sets in, behavior changes. People become more transactional. They give less freely, they commit less deeply, they plan more defensively. This is not because they are selfish, it is because trust is a prerequisite for generosity. Without trust, generosity becomes risk. In earlier eras, trust was reinforced by visible reciprocity. Work led to stability. Contribution led to belonging. Effort led to progress. When those links weaken, trust frays. Today, many people feel like they are contributing to systems that no longer reciprocate meaningfully. They pay in, comply, adapt, and still face insecurity. That experience shapes perception far more than any official reassurance. It is also why appeals to nostalgia fall flat. Telling people to return to values that thrived under different conditions ignores the material context that made those values viable. Values do not exist in a vacuum. They are sustained by structures. When structures change, values must be expressed differently or they become performative. Hard work still matters, but it must be paired with strategic awareness. Responsibility still matters, but it must include self protection. Ignoring this reality creates a moral trap where individuals are expected to uphold standards that systems no longer support. That trap breeds resentment and burnout. Burnout is now widespread, not just professionally, but existentially. People are tired of carrying contradictions. They are tired of being told they are failing at a game whose rules keep shifting. This fatigue is not weakness, it is a signal. It signals that adaptation is overdue. Adaptation does not require abandoning principles, it requires updating strategies. It requires distinguishing between what is timeless and what is conditional. Timeless principles include integrity, self respect, and care for others. Conditional strategies include how you work, where you invest, and what you prioritize. Confusing the two leads to rigidity. Rigidity in changing conditions leads to breakage. Flexibility, by contrast, preserves core values while adjusting expression. It allows you to remain grounded while moving through uncertainty. This is where many people struggle because flexibility has been framed as inconsistency or lack of conviction. In reality, it is intelligence applied over time. Intelligence is not stubbornness, it is responsiveness to evidence. Evidence right now suggests that centralized solutions are struggling to meet decentralized needs. It suggests that one size approaches create blind spots. It suggests that resilience is increasingly local and personal. Local does not mean small minded, it means close enough to be responsive. Personal does not mean selfish, it means accountable. When decisions are made closer to those affected, feedback loops tighten. Mistakes are corrected faster. Trust is easier to rebuild. Large systems struggle with this because scale creates distance. Distance dulls empathy. Dull empathy leads to poor decisions. This is not a moral judgment, it is a structural reality. Understanding this helps remove unnecessary anger from the equation. Anger directed at abstractions rarely produces results. Clarity does. Clarity allows you to redirect energy towards what you can influence. It allows you to disengage emotionally from what you cannot. That emotional disengagement is often misread as apathy. It is not. It is conservation. Energy is finite. Spending it on unproductive outrage leaves less for constructive action. Constructive action does not have to be dramatic. It can be incremental and quiet. It can look like building skills, reducing dependencies, and strengthening relationships. Relationships deserve special attention here. As systems strain, interpersonal dynamics shift. Stress tests bonds. Differences in adaptation speed create friction. Some people cling to old narratives because they provide comfort. Others move on more quickly. This divergence can create tension even among those who care about each other. Navigating that tension requires empathy and boundaries. Empathy allows you to understand where others are coming from. Boundaries protect you from being pulled backward. You do not need to convince everyone. You do not need universal agreement. You need alignment with those who share your priorities. Alignment reduces friction. It creates momentum. It allows cooperation without constant justification. This is another reason why men walking away resonates with so many people. It offers a framework for selective engagement rather than blanket withdrawal. Walking away is not about abandoning all commitments. It is about refusing commitments that are one sided or unsustainable. It is about choosing where to invest effort based on return, not in purely financial terms, but in terms of dignity and stability. Dignity matters more in times of strain. When people feel respected, they endure hardship more effectively. When dignity is compromised, even abundance feels hollow. Many systems today ask for compliance without offering dignity. They demand adherence without transparency. That combination erodes legitimacy. Legitimacy cannot be mandated, it must be earned and maintained. When legitimacy fades, people look for alternatives. Alternatives do not need to be perfect, they need to be better aligned. This is how parallel structures emerge, not through ideology, but through practicality. People do what works. If something stops working, they look elsewhere. If the elsewhere proves functional, loyalty shifts. This process is gradual and often invisible until it reaches a tipping point. By the time it becomes obvious, adaptation is no longer optional. We are somewhere in the middle of that process now, early enough that options still exist, late enough that denial is costly. That middle phase is uncomfortable. It lacks clear signals. It demands judgment under uncertainty. Judgment improves with reflection. Reflection requires slowing down enough to think. Thinking is increasingly undervalued in a culture optimized for reaction. Taking time to think can feel like falling behind. In reality, it is how you avoid running in the wrong direction efficiently. Efficiency applied to the wrong goal accelerates failure. Effectiveness requires clarity about goals. Goals must be realistic and meaningful. For many people, this means redefining success away from accumulation towards sustainability, away from visibility toward stability, away from external approval toward internal coherence. Internal coherence is the sense that your actions align with your values and understanding. When coherence is present, stress decreases even under pressure. When coherence is absent, even small challenges feel overwhelming. Building coherence requires honesty. It requires admitting when something is no longer working. It requires courage to change course. Change is often framed as loss, but it is also release. Releasing outdated expectations frees energy. That energy can be reinvested in learning. Learning is one of the most powerful forms of adaptation because it expands options. Learning does not always mean formal education. It means understanding systems, incentives, and patterns. It means learning how money actually works instead of how it is marketed. It means learning how power operates instead of how it is described. It means learning how human behavior responds to stress. This kind of learning is often discouraged because it reduces dependence. Dependence is profitable. Independence, even partial, shifts leverage. Leverage is what ultimately matters in negotiations, whether explicit or implicit. Without leverage, you accept terms. With leverage, you choose. Most people have less leverage today than they believe. Recognizing that is uncomfortable but necessary. Building leverage takes time. It requires patience and consistency. It rarely happens overnight. This is why early preparation matters. Waiting until pressure peaks limits options. Preparation does not mean hoarding or panic, it means thoughtful positioning. Positioning is about where you stand relative to risk. It is about minimizing exposure to single points of failure. Single points of failure are common in modern life. One job, one income stream, one institution, one assumption. Reducing single points of failure increases resilience. Resilience increases confidence. Confidence grounded in preparation is different from bravado. It is quiet. It does not require validation. That kind of confidence allows you to say no calmly. It allows you to walk away without bitterness. And bitterness keeps you psychologically tethered to what you reject. Walking away cleanly requires letting go. Letting go is difficult when identity is wrapped up in struggle. Many people have been defined by endurance for so long that stepping back feels like betrayal. But endurance without purpose is not virtue. Purpose gives endurance meaning. Purpose today must be self defined because inherited scripts are misaligned. This does not mean rejecting all guidance, it means filtering guidance through experience. Experience is the most honest teacher, even when lessons are harsh. Ignoring experience to preserve comforting beliefs delays growth. Growth often requires discomfort. That discomfort is temporary. Stagnation is not. As we move forward, the question is not whether pressure will continue. It will. The question is how you will respond. Response shaped by clarity leads to adaptation. Response driven by fear leads to reaction. Reaction benefits those who profit from instability. Adaptation benefits those who seek stability. This is the crossroads many people are approaching, whether consciously or not. Choosing adaptation requires intention. It requires stepping out of autopilot. Autopilot was designed for a different environment. It assumes conditions that no longer hold. Turning off autopilot can be disorienting at first, but it is the only way to steer. Steering does not guarantee smooth travel. It increases the chance of arriving somewhere viable. As pressure continues to build, one of the most revealing changes is how people relate to time. In stable periods, time feels abundant. Plans stretch far into the future. Sacrifice today is justified by confidence tomorrow will be better. In unstable periods, time compresses. People focus on the near term because the long term feels unreliable. This compression changes decision making. Long term promises lose power. Short term survivability gains importance. That does not mean people stop caring about the future. It means they stop trusting distant assurances that lack credible paths. This shift is often misinterpreted as impatience or irresponsibility. In reality, it is a rational adjustment to uncertainty. When outcomes feel fragile, flexibility matters more than delayed rewards. Systems built on long horizon commitments struggle when trust in those horizons erodes. Retirement models, career ladders, institutional loyalty all depend on confidence that the future will honor the present. When that confidence fades, people naturally seek arrangements with shorter feedback loops. They want to see cause and effect more clearly. They want effort to produce visible results. This is why alternative paths are becoming more attractive, not because they are perfect, but because they offer immediacy and agency. Agency is one of the most undervalued needs in modern life. It is the feeling that your actions matter, that you are not merely reacting to forces beyond your control. When agency is stripped away, frustration rises even if material conditions are tolerable. When agency is present, people endure hardship more effectively. Many current systems reduce agency while demanding compliance. That combination is corrosive. It creates learned helplessness masked as order. Reclaiming agency often begins with small choices: choosing where to spend attention, choosing what narratives to accept, choosing when to disengage. Attention is especially important. What you focus on shapes perception. Perception shapes emotion. Emotion shapes behavior. An environment saturated with alarmist messaging and contradictory signals erodes clarity. It keeps people in a constant state of reaction. Stepping back from that noise is not denial, it is strategic clarity. Clarity allows you to differentiate between what is urgent and what is important. Urgency is often manufactured. Importance is usually quieter. Important actions include strengthening health, maintaining financial buffers, nurturing relationships, and building skills that translate across contexts. Urgent distractions often revolve around outrage, spectacle, and fear. They consume energy without increasing capability. Reducing exposure to manufactured urgency is one of the most effective ways to regain mental bandwidth. Bandwidth matters because adaptation requires thought. Thought requires space. Space is increasingly scarce in a world optimized for constant engagement. Reclaiming it is an act of self defense. This self defense is not hostile, it is protective. And protection does not mean withdrawing from responsibility, it means redefining responsibility in a way that includes your own well being. Many people were taught that responsibility meant self sacrifice without limit. That definition made sense when systems rewarded sacrifice with stability. It makes far less sense when systems extract sacrifice without reciprocation. Updating the definition of responsibility is necessary for sustainability. You cannot pour endlessly from an empty container. Sustainable responsibility includes saying no. It includes prioritizing recovery. It includes acknowledging limits. Limits are not weaknesses, they are realities. Ignoring limits leads to collapse. Respecting limits allows endurance. This principle applies at every level, from individuals to societies. The difference is that individuals are often forced to respect limits while large systems try to postpone them. Postponement increases eventual cost. Understanding this dynamic helps explain why denial is so persistent at higher levels. Admitting limits requires change. Change threatens established power. Individuals do not have the luxury of indefinite postponement. Bills arrive, bodies wear down, time passes. This asymmetry creates resentment when individuals are told to absorb consequences for decisions they did not make. Resentment can be destructive if it becomes the sole focus, but it can also be informative if it highlights misalignment. The goal is not to eliminate resentment entirely. The goal is to use it as a signal, then move towards constructive adjustment. Constructive adjustment requires separating emotion from strategy. Emotion alerts you, strategy guides you. Without strategy, emotion burns out. Without emotion, strategy lacks urgency. Balancing the two is an ongoing process. Another major shift happening now is the reevaluation of consumption. For decades, consumption was framed as progress, buying more signaled success. Debt smoothed the path. As costs rise and security falls, consumption loses its appeal. The pleasure it offers feels temporary and increasingly risky. People begin to favor durability over novelty, function over display, usefulness over status. This shift threatens industries built on churn and aspiration. In response, messaging intensifies. Desire is manufactured more aggressively. Resisting that pull requires awareness. It requires asking whether a purchase solves a real problem or simply soothes anxiety. Anxiety driven consumption is expensive and unsatisfying. It creates short relief followed by longer stress. Reducing unnecessary consumption frees resources. Resources provide options. Options restore agency. Agency reduces anxiety. This cycle reinforces itself positively when managed intentionally. The same logic applies to commitments. Overcommitting drains capacity. It leaves little room for adaptation. In uncertain times, optionality matters more than optimization. Having the ability to adjust is more valuable than extracting maximum efficiency from a fragile setup. Optimization assumes stability. Optionality prepares for change. Many people were optimized for a world that no longer exists. Rebuilding optionality takes time and humility. Humility here does not mean submission. It means recognizing what you do not control. Control is often misunderstood. You do not control outcomes, you control inputs. Focusing on controllable inputs reduces frustration. It shifts attention from what you wish were different to what you can actually influence. You can influence how you allocate time, how you manage energy, how you respond to pressure, how you prepare for uncertainty. These may seem small compared to systemic forces, but they compound. Compound effects are powerful because they operate quietly over time. This is another reason why waiting for dramatic moments to act is a mistake. By the time drama arrives, leverage is reduced. Quiet preparation done early often looks unnecessary until it becomes essential. Those who prepared are rarely praised. They are simply less exposed. Exposure determines impact. Reducing exposure to fragile systems is one of the most practical forms of self protection. Fragility often hides behind complexity. Complex systems can appear robust until a specific stress reveals hidden dependencies. Understanding where complexity creates fragility helps you choose where to disengage. Disengagement does not have to be absolute. Partial disengagement can significantly reduce risk. For example, diversifying income does not require abandoning traditional work entirely. It requires reducing dependence on a single source. Similarly, questioning narratives does not require rejecting all information. It requires critical filtering. Critical filtering is a skill. It improves with practice. It involves asking simple questions. Who benefits? What assumptions are being made? What is omitted? These questions cut through noise. Noise thrives on speed. Insight requires patience. Patience is difficult in environments that reward immediacy. Cultivating it is a competitive advantage. Competitive advantage here does not mean domination, it means resilience. Resilience allows you to endure volatility without losing coherence. Coherence matters because identity fragmentation increases stress. When your actions align with your understanding, stress decreases even if conditions are hard. Many people feel stressed not only because conditions are difficult, but because they are trying to live according to scripts that contradict reality. Releasing those scripts reduces internal conflict. Internal conflict is exhausting. Reducing it frees energy. Energy freed can be redirected toward constructive goals. Constructive goals do not need to be grand, they need to be meaningful. Meaning anchors effort. Without it, effort feels futile. Meaning today often comes from self chosen commitments rather than inherited roles. This is another area where walking away is misunderstood. It is not about rejecting meaning, it is about choosing it deliberately. Deliberate choice restores dignity. Dignity is not bestowed by institutions, it is claimed through alignment between values and action. When you act in ways that respect your own limits and priorities, dignity follows. This dignity is quiet, it does not need recognition. Recognition is often fleeting. Dignity endures. As narratives intensify and pressure increases, maintaining dignity will become harder and more important. Harder because demands will escalate. More important because dignity anchors self respect. Self respect is the foundation of boundaries. Without it, boundaries collapse. Boundaries protect time and energy. Time and energy enable adaptation. Adaptation preserves agency. Agency sustains hope. Hope grounded in preparation is different from blind optimism. It is calm. It does not depend on promises. This kind of hope allows you to face uncertainty without panic. Panic leads to bad decisions. Calm allows assessment. Assessment requires information, but not overload. Choosing information sources carefully is part of preparation. Sources that amplify fear without offering clarity drain capacity. Sources that offer perspective strengthen it. Perspective comes from context. Context requires history. Understanding how past transitions unfolded can provide reassurance. People have navigated uncertainty before. What is different now is speed and scale. What remains the same is human adaptability. Adaptability thrives when individuals retain agency and community. Before we end, I want to hear from you. What did you think about what was discussed? Do you agree? What resonated most? Leave a comment and share your thoughts because these conversations matter and your perspective adds value. And remember, like the video if you like it, do not forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away, and cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.